Welcome back to our Synergistic CX Podcast, 4th episode. This is part 2 of 3, where we're walking through the perfume retail industry. And our next topics we're going to get into is the actual customer journey, also known as the marketing funnel. All right, so the customer journey, for those of you that don't know what a customer journey is, if you're new to the customer experience management sector, or you're just hearing about a customer journey for the first time and don't know what that is, it's effectively the journey that a customer goes through, a typical customer goes through when they're interacting with a brand. So at first, they're interested in the product that the brand sells, then they become aware of that brand selling that product, and then they decide to go visit the establishment or make that phone call and move their way through the process of actually discussing the product and looking into it with the staff, and then they go through the purchase process and so on. And so for each micro industry that we focus on, we have the customer journey. And here we have several different stages across the top. And every micro industry that we look at has these same 5 stages, which is awareness, consideration, conversion, retention, and advocacy. And then inside of each of those stages, we have the steps. And some of those stages have 1 step, some of them have 2, and then conversion in the middle. There's a lot that happens there where someone converts to becoming a customer. There's 5 different steps there. This particular micro industry has a lot of different touch points. Underneath that on this diagram, you can see inside of each step the various touch points that the customer will interact with in those steps. And there's quite a few here. And then at the bottom, there's the various a list of the various CX methodologies that can be used to actually analyze the experience of that particular step and those touch points. So we always do this first because we haven't actually looked at this in detail and studied it. So in this particular sector, we've got a number of steps here, but let's talk about these five stages. Are there any particular points where people are going to talk with the online reviews and ratings, talk about and have particularly good experiences or particularly bad experiences? Let's run the table here. Emil, do you have a thought on where this industry is going to do particularly well or particularly poor?
Well, we have seen consistent trend from the other industries to excel in conversion and to fail in retention. As far as customer feedback from online reviews and ratings is concerned. So I would vote on consistency, and that would be my bet. The sales process would excel, and after sales activities will tank.
All right. Keira, you're our expert for this particular industry. What's your thinking here?
Well, I feel like when in store, I think the sales associates do, in our experience, the sales associates do a great job once the person comes into the store. The welcoming, the product knowledge, taking the customer through the scent journey, showing them different samples, testers, and this sort of thing. I think what often happens, though, in stores is that customers will go in, they'll try on the perfume, they'll try on various different perfumes and get samples, and then often not purchase. They'll go home and then maybe purchase online, or look around perhaps for cheap. I mean, perfumes in general are not cheap, for the most part. And so people sort of often shop around. So sometimes that in-store experience can be more, sampling more than anything. But I think, and like we were mentioning before, is that once you sort of lock into a scent, though, once you've found your scent, I think that the advocacy stage is probably going to be quite strong, because people often, once you find your scent, you often stick with it for a long time.
That makes sense. Cristiani, have you got an opinion on what you think you might see here?
It depends a lot of the shopper profile, because in terms of retention, if they already know which brand they want to buy, they can easily find good deals online. So the loyalty to the store is not that high unless they have very good service. It's very practical for them in terms of location. In terms of awareness, I think the brands itself help a lot the retail experience. So I would say that good experience is awareness and consideration, and the challenge would be retention.
That makes sense. Okay, well let's cue the drum roll and we'll see what we see here on the next slide. So we're arriving here at what we call the moment of truth, and let's go to the next slide where it's actually zoomed in. Yeah, there we go. And now we've got a good look here. So what this represents is we've taken all of these online reviews and ratings that we've analyzed, and we've passed them through aspect-based sentiment analysis, where we're looking at what the customers talk about. We're looking at everything they've mentioned with respect to the marketing mix and the elements and so forth, like we talked about in part 1 of our podcast. And we've distributed those online reviews and ratings into these various stages of the customer journey. And so this line represents the average sentiment around that particular portion of the customer journey. So there's a dot there for each step. The size of the dot represents exactly how frequently that particular step was mentioned, how often that aspect was mentioned in the customer journey. So as you can see here, a lot of people are talking about the greeting from the frontline staff. Not surprising. That's a very important metric. But the other key thing that you can see here is this shaded gray area. And whereas the line shows you the average in that particular step, so you can see the entire customer journey from left to right as a customer moves through the journey experience of that particular brand. As they move through here, you can see that line moving up and down, and that's the average. But the gray area is actually the distribution. It is the standard deviation around the mean. So this is where about a little over 2/3 of all of the responses fall. So what you see here is a very large, a relatively large gray area around most of the line here in the journey, which means that the actual sentiments themselves on the reviews is actually varied pretty heavily. In particular, all the way on the right there with the advocacy, there's a wide range of inconsistency there. So there's some opportunities to improve and tighten things up. It does look like maybe the little red dot, the payment and pricing there, there's some relative tightness around there in the testing, at the end of the testing and sampling process. Looks like things are consistently bad. So we've got a somewhat tight gray area there, and that's what that gray area represents. So what we see here, yeah, it looks like things are pretty strong initially. The needs identification and exploration is pretty strong, and then the research of the product range is pretty strong too. And then the greeting is very important and not so good for a lot of people in this industry. So Keira, I think this backs up what you were saying, is customers really want that initial greeting. They're there for something that's a very personal experience. You know, in some way they probably feel vulnerable if they've never bought perfume before or bought a scent, and they're in there the first time and they don't have any idea what they're even looking for or how to even start to approach this. Like if you're shopping for a car, at least you know you need to test drive it, right? Perfume, you don't even know, well, do I just grab something and spray it on me? Do I have to have somebody do that for me? What do I do? So I can see how that's a very important psychological component with respect to the customer experience.
And also you can see, you know, where it dips there at the end, the conversion. I'm not sure, does that say payments and pricing? So I guess maybe pricing and more expensive pricing sort of comes into that perhaps. But at the same time, I mean, we work in the work that we've done with probably the more high-end perfume brands, is that in fact their sales associates are trained not to push sales, and in fact to drive more advocacy than actually sales. And I think because again it's this very personal experience and people will come to it when they want. I mean, it's almost like, you know, part of their sales approach is really to leave people sort of in peace and a little bit of silence, not to just continually be pushing and selling and talking and promoting the brand, but really giving the person space to, you know, absorb not only through the skin, but absorb the perfume, you know, through, I guess, their own senses. Because such this olfactory, you know, sense that we have takes us back to memories, and so it's allowing the customer time to generate their own memories, not, you know, your stories perhaps as the sales associate. So maybe this not being so pushy, perhaps would that have some indication, do you think, as to why? I mean, why that area is critical?
I definitely think it could be. I do remember reading in a scientific magazine one time that the sense of smell is actually the most deeply rooted psychological sense, like more so than touch, more so than hearing, sight, even. It's smell that gets you right down to the core.
Yes.
We're so tuned to that from determining if food is ripe versus something that's not edible. I mean, like there's some basic just human deep thoughts and feelings that are instinctive and reactionary just to smell. So there's nothing else like that. I mean, other than like you see something red, it might be scary or dangerous or something, but the smell is just you're at a whole nother level than a lot of other industries are.
Yes. Yeah, it's very true. And I think too, when you're in store like this too, that the smell can actually overwhelm. And there's a lot of tools that they have in store to try and to sort of relax your nose almost between those moments when you're actually trying and testing. So yes, it's one of those very sensitive senses that we have, and very reactive to that sense of memory. It's amazing around smell.
Yeah, Emil, what are your thoughts here?
Well, I clearly felt in my prediction, so that is obvious. I expected a very different picture, so the conversion I expected to be entirely in the green or green and fair zone, and the retention to drop down, which is clearly not the case here. And this micro industry is unique in that aspect compared to everything else that we have been through so far. So it certainly will be interesting, and I think it is actually for us, for this podcast, the next step is really to take the areas in red and dissect them, because I'm now here interested into what this red step means, because payment and pricing is about completing the purchase through a smooth transaction process. This is what this step of the customer journey is about. What we consistently see in these industry studies is that there is one step in the journey which is consistent in the red. And this is now the fourth industry study, micro industry study that we're doing that is showing that. And I think it is time for us to, starting maybe from the next industry study, to take that area and dissect down into what are the key drivers here, into that lack of.
I was going to suggest the same thing. Yeah. Keira, have you got any insight in here? Is there anything that jumps out at you as this industry, in the context of this industry? We've seen it across all of the ones that we've studied so far, but is there anything here that you think would be a particular trigger for people commenting about the payment and pricing? It sounds like obviously this particular industry does have higher pricing for its product. Some things it is a rather luxury industry. So maybe customers are complaining about high prices, but do you think there's something in the payment process itself that is systemic in this industry as far as a problem?
I guess in our experience of mystery shopping in stores, I don't recall there being any particular issues with the payment process itself. I think it's probably more around the pricing, and so because there's perfume and then there's eau de parfum, which is that very concentrated, amazing perfumes where you only need to use such a small amount and it lasts a long time. So there is often, then the perception of value for money. People are sort of buying a small amount of this beautiful parfum which then, you see only 30 mils and you're thinking, wow, really? I'm paying all that for that? But then again, and this is around the people and the sales associates to really be sharing the longevity of that small 30 mils is going to last a whole lot longer than the regular perfumes. So I'd say something around that too. Maybe it's a value for money perception.
Interesting.
Yeah, it's hard to tell with mystery shopping because we're there to do a task, and the mystery shoppers don't necessarily give feedback on how the pricing affects them, because they're there. Often they don't make a purchase, or in our experience, we don't often go through that part of the process. However, because it is a very personalized product and something that we can't return and it's expensive. But nevertheless, the pricing is not really considered in this. From my own experience, personal experience, it's probably around the high pricing.
Well, what you just mentioned there is absolutely the entire concept of what we call synergistic CX. So the synergistic CX, obviously, other than being the name of the podcast, it's a concept that we very much advocate across the entirety of the CX channel. It is the concept that you have, as Emil mentioned earlier, these subjective measurements like online reviews and ratings and voice of the customer surveys, which find out what people think. And then you have the objective measurements of mystery shopping and internal audits that actually tell you very objectively what your customers are experiencing operationally in the stores. And in order to really understand what's going on with a brand, you have to have both. You know, a lot of people argue, well, this one's better because of this, or this one's better because of that. But you really need to see both. And I think there's a clear opportunity here based on what you were just saying too. If you look here, we've got a very strong green average here on this customer journey map, right dead center in the conversion. So you've got that green dot there, and it shows that overall the average is relatively high for the personalized fragrance consultation. So overall, on the average, as far as the customers talking in the online reviews and ratings, they're very happy with what they're getting from stores generally with this personalized fragrance consultation, which makes sense. That's probably the number one thing they train the employees on.
Yes.
Yeah.
And that's what I was about to say. It's where, in our experience, it's where these companies spend most of their time focused during training, in-store training, out, you know, this is where they're focused. And because they call it a scent journey, you know, they want that the customer to be taken along the scent journey within the sort of frame of what you like and what you like, not what you dislike, what you like, and then take you on this journey through. And it may not just be necessarily perfume, it could also be then the room scent or the body spray or other, you know, add-on products that might come with that brand.
That makes perfect sense. And if you look at here, though, even though the average is fairly high, I mean, that's a pretty good average. The spread there, that gray shaded area, shows a wide amount of discrepancy. And some of it's almost getting down into the orange there, where it's actually not very good. And this would be a perfect case where you would say mystery shopping is absolutely needed to tighten that up. You don't want variance there. You want everybody to always have a great personalized fragrance consultation.
Yeah, and one of the reasons for that, it might be that in the majority of the countries, the perfume stores, they are also cosmetic stores. So the staff really need to have a very large amount of understanding of different things, not only perfumes, but cosmetics, creams. So the type of knowledge that they have nowadays in terms of cosmetics is very large. So the amount of information that they need to memorize and to know in terms of not only cosmetics, but also makeup and perfumes is very significant. They don't sell only perfumes. While a few years ago, they used to have people specialized only in fragrance and perfumes. Nowadays, in most markets, is not as much. So the investments that brands need to make in terms of training, in terms of the brand culture and everything, in terms of the specifics of selling the fragrance, the psychological aspect, as Erik was mentioning, in terms of the personality impact and everything, it's totally different of someone selling a fragrance and selling makeup, for example. But nowadays, in most of brands, it will be the same person that is selling both.
Okay, so what I would suggest here is we don't wait until the next industry study. I'm really curious now. So we are going to extend the review of the payment and pricing step in the magazine that we're going to publish. We normally publish the magazine a week or two after the podcast. But here, just to clarify, in payment and pricing, what we measure in terms of customer objectives is not only the quick and efficient payment, but also clarity on purchases and policies. So I suspect that there may be something here. And we'll uncover this when we dive into that topic.
Great. Yeah, that'll be exciting to see that. And since you mentioned the magazine, for anyone who wants to, you can download that on our website at cx-channel.com. You can see all of the previous magazines, and they actually get into more detail than what we have here on the screens of this podcast. So if you really want to see some numbers and read different articles about this particular industry, then download the magazine and have a look. It's free. So key takeaways here. Yeah, obviously, we've seen, as we've discussed, there needs to be some improvement on the payment and the pricing process side of things. But also we saw that there are some other areas that are very important. There's high satisfaction in the initial exploration and consultation. So that consultative step, as we were just talking about right there in the middle, seems to be very good, which is actually really really good for the industry. That's a strong, very important part, like you were saying, Keira. And customers seem to be overall very happy with that. There definitely needs to be a lot of attention made to the greeting and the post-purchase communication. That greeting, again, Keira, this is why you're the expert. The greeting is also very important. It's critical. Those are the 2 points where your people shine, is the greeting and that consultation experience.
Mm. And I think it's because what often happens in store too is that because there is so much focus on that personalizing the experience, is that then often the sales associate might be tied in with the customer for quite some time. So sometimes the greeting will be missed because they're already spending time with the existing customers in store. So I guess it's that, remembering to sort of acknowledge and greet, and just sort of at least sort of to give a wave to the incoming customers so that they feel that they're getting some attention anyway with the greeting. But often that's the case. And some of these perfume stores can be incredibly busy as well. They just physically can't have enough staff to cater for the crowds.
And how long would you say that typical consultative experience is for the average customer?
It depends on. It depends on. I guess the actual sales associate. Are they really deep diving into that experience and really asking as many questions as they can to discover, what might be the preferences for the customer. But I'd say sort of 15 to 20 minutes perhaps would be perhaps an average. If I think about our mystery shoppers in store, most of them, if they're in those sort of single brand boutiques where they're really being taken on the experience, they could be there anywhere from sort of 15 minutes to 30 minutes. I had an amazing experience once years ago for a client that I think I was in the store for well over an hour. We looked at everything. It was the most memorable. I'll never forget it. It was really just an amazing experience because it was incredibly personalized. Mm-hmm. She asked all the right questions, found exactly the right scent. It was an incredibly expensive perfume. I didn't purchase in the end, but I was close.
But you remember the story, you remember the brand, you remember all of that. Yeah.
Yeah. I probably remember the sales associate if I saw her in the street.
Wow. Very cool. Okay, well, for the next segment, we are going to talk about a starter voice of the customer survey. So we've been focusing on one of the major subjective metrics here, which is the online reviews and ratings. But any good synergistic CX program is going to not only have online reviews and ratings collecting subjective thoughts and feelings, but also have a voice of the customer survey out there for their customers to be able to complete and provide information and feedback that way. So, Emil, you want to walk us through a starter VOC survey for the perfume industry?
Absolutely. Very briefly, you're right. So far, we have been discussing results based on online reviews and ratings. But in the realm of voice of the customer feedback surveys serve as a critical aid and supplement to the more common, I would say, online reviews and ratings. Here, there is a significant challenge for the businesses, and this challenge is how to effectively capture valuable feedback within the constrained attention span afforded for the customers. And that is why we focus this segment on what we call the starter VOC survey, because crafting the optimal voice of the customer survey is essential as it directly influences the quality and reliability of customer insights, which are pivotal for informed decision-making and strategic planning. Just to emphasize, both online reviews and ratings and voice of the customer surveys are subjective ways to measure the customer perceptions, thoughts, and feelings, but they supplement each other very well. So a starter voice of the customer survey can be created by harnessing insights from customer sentiments, thoughts and feelings expressed in their online reviews and ratings, focusing on the topics customers discuss most frequently. And this is what we're doing here. We're taking what customers talk about in the online reviews and ratings programs, and we take that conclusions and we create a starter voice of the customer survey. Therefore, the starter voice of the customer survey composition is following. We have a primary question, which is normally, actually, I'm going to get back to that in a second. The primary question is then followed up by key driver questions. Each key driver question can be drilled down into the specific details, and then we finish off this with a closing question. Specifically, in the current micro industry, perfume stores, a sample voice of the customer survey may be, how satisfied are you with brand? So that is the starter question. That is the primary question, which then we follow up with 5 key driver questions. And these are, how satisfied are you with the greeting received from our staff? How satisfied are you with the ambience of our store? Product availability and variety, fragrance, consultation provided by our staff, and pricing and value of our products. Again, these were the 5 key topics which were identified from the online reviews and ratings feedback. And then for a closing question, we suggest an NPS, Net Promoter Score question, which is on a scale of 0 to 10, how likely are you to recommend the brand to a friend or colleague? So that is the general shell, if you will, of the starter VOC survey. Then the key driver detailed questions will offer the opportunity to dive deeper into each of the key driver questions. And here I'm going to use I'm going to use the first question, greeting received from our staff, as an example. So obviously, if the customer scores this question with a rating of 5 stars, we're fine. But any answer which is 1 star, which is very dissatisfied, through 4 stars, which is satisfied but not completely or very satisfied, we need to dive deeper and understand what are the drivers. In the case of greeting received from our staff, the key driver details are warmth and friendliness, promptness in acknowledging, professional appearance, staff engagement, and willingness to assist. Obviously, there's always an other option, but the objective here is to highlight the key drivers and the key driver details which are prevalent based on the online reviews and ratings. So this is how we built this starter voice of the customer survey. And if you are a store owner or a business owner in this micro industry, and if you don't have any better ideas or more precise objectives, the starter VOC survey offers a first step, which is an optimal both from a size standpoint and from topic standpoint, because the topics are based on the overall big picture in that micro industry. So that is that, Erik.
All right, that wraps up part 2 of our 3 parts for this particular episode of the Synergistic CX Podcast. We're talking about perfume retail stores and the customer experience of that particular industry. We'll now move to part 3. We're going to talk more about the industry in general and hear some more from our expert guest, Keira.